Bam. Just like that. We're live.
Oh, I didn't even realize we weren't live.
Yeah, no, dude. I always keep us back in the green room for a little bit. Don't need to surprise anybody. Eric's got the official C&C mug going.
That's right.
That looks nice.
Yeah.
Now, for our viewers, will that be available on the Teespring store?
It is now. Yes.
Yeah. So for everybody who's interested in getting a Carpets and Coffee mug, Teespring, you can find what's it all under? NPR Network.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot up there. Tons.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff. We
Yeah.
definitely have to add more for sure.
Yeah, it'll be a never-ending sort of thing, like reptiles are. Just a never-ending collection and adding more.
Yeah. When will it stop?
It will never stop.
I think I did a bad thing too.
Uh-oh.
I might delve into the world of dwarf monitors.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sounds
red
like
Ackies.
somebody's buying crickets.
I know. So here's the thing that might work to my advantage. So my dad is now, he's full blazing, ready to breed his own roaches and crickets and all worms and all this kind of shit.
Nice.
So it's like, okay. I was like, hey, Dad, what if I, supply some of this stuff and then you just breed them and I'll just come by and pick them up. So
Perfect.
I think that's how it's going to work. So we'll see.
Nice, dude.
Not a bad hookup. Don't have to have them in your house.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hate crickets. Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible creatures.
I'm hoping that I like the Ackies more than I hate crickets.
The good thing is Ackies are savage little ninja hunters. They let no crickets go. Like they will leave no corner unturned hunting for crickets.
Right.
So they will, as long as like the enclosure's secure, they'll snag them. They're really good hunters. We've got a couple in the shop. We got a pair, and they're just so fun to watch, dude. They're active all day, and they'll burrow around, climb, bask. But if there's movement, little crickets, poof, they're on them.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So have you worked with them at the shop, but have you worked with them personally or no?
I've not kept them here, but I have definitely like handled some, seen care of some, cared for some plenty at the shop and elsewhere. But yeah, they're another species I would consider getting for sure. Yeah. They're pretty amazing, dude.
They are really good too, with the red ones.
Yeah.
The ones I'm getting red.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you guys can you send a picture in the chat? No, right?
I don't.
No, it's just chat.
Yeah.
I'll send it in our chat.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, they're fun. They're like little bulldogs with Energizer Bunny batteries. You just don't ever stop.
How big of an enclosure do you need for an adult?
I mean, of course, what I'm going to say right now will probably upset a lot of the folks that write care sheets online and people that walk around and police the Ackie monitor keepers. But I would tell you, you could keep an adult pair in a very dynamically arranged 3-foot enclosure, no problem. I think the trick to that would be adding vertical space, putting a high basking spot, and the idea of a Reeve stack.
Yeah.
Lucas, are you familiar with the Reeve stack?
No.
It's named after Reeves is the guy's last name, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not as up to speed on all the details, but basically it's a stack of layers of ply with little boards, and it basically makes like a pyramid with little slots in there at different thermal gradients up to the hottest basking spot where small monitors and lizards can tuck themselves into these hot crevices and regulate appropriately by hitting these very specific tiers of temperature. And with how active Ackie monitors are, they will use all that space. So if you can create some, vertical cliff space with lots of cool crevices and things going up to that basking spot and some hollow logs, and just a bunch of surface area within like a 3x2, dude, you'll
Yeah.
have a beautiful arrangement for 2 Ackies. And the nice thing is, one pair, they bond pretty nicely. They're very cordial, and you can cohab them like all the time, and they're just great.
That's
Sweet.
awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, Eric, when's the last time you got bit by a monitor?
10 years ago.
Okay. So nothing like a snake bite.
Oh, yes.
They hold on, and they bite down harder as you try to pull away.
Right.
The trick, if they ever get you, put them down on the ground, just let go. They'll let go eventually.
Oh, really?
Just put them down. Let them go.
Great.
Get all 4 of their feet on the ground and let them go. Do it in their enclosure so they can take off. But man, when they bulldog you and they grab you, it's always a knuckle, and they like twist and wrench. You're like, ooh, you're impressive. Now let go.
I think I heard that the reds are a little more nippy than the yellows, but
Yeah, they can.
I don't know.
But
I'm getting
like,
the red ones.
I think it's marginal in the difference. I think if you learn, how to handle monitors, and you're just, you don't ever restrain them, and you get really good with the walking technique and how to pick them up and how to approach them, and you learn your animals, I think you can avoid bites pretty readily. It's not that bad.
Right.
Yeah.
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 What's that?
Savannah monitor.
Savannah. Yeah.
Yeah. Nasty. I was like, I need my hands. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't chance
Exactly.
it.
That was one of my big things with the vivarium is I wouldn't work with the Argus because I still needed to play.
Ooh. Yeah. Argus are a little dodgy.
The Crocs. No.
Yep.
I said no, thank you.
Yeah.
Mm.
I learned
I
really
agree.
quickly not to wiggle my fingers like this at all in the lace monitor cage at work because the female thinks that's food.
Oh shit.
As she
Yeah.
said, that looks like food to me.
Yeah. She comes running.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'd like to do some naturalistic setups of like I think I told you guys I want some of those I don't know if I'm saying it right, Strophuris geckos.
Yeah.
Am I saying
The
that right?
Strophuris. Yeah.
Strophuris, yeah.
Yeah.
That's seeing one of them in the wild, and it's like you come back and you're like, oh, that would be cool to have. If I was going to have a gecko, that would be the one. And then I'm reading this book, and man, I'm hooked.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, man, that's a cool book. They did a good job. So,
and those are fun geckos too, man. They're not like any other geckos. They're different than like North American banded geckos. They're different from leopard geckos. They're different from crested geckos. And then when you see like a big, I believe it's the Amia, the really rough knobs, dude, they get huge with no tail, and they're just like little English bulldogs with big eyes. They're like, it's kind of badass.
They jack themselves up like
they stand up like an alligator high walking with no tail, like
that'd be cool.
That would be fun to set something up for those animals. I think of what was the guest you guys had on NPR? He's got his YouTube channel. I subscribe to it, and I apologize, I'm blanking on his name, but he does those really nice naturalistic enclosures where he even like had the clay mud flat. Yes. Yeah. So I think of that one enclosure you did with the snake coming out of like the mud cracks and things. And
that's Matt Somerville. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just picture like the mud crack flats with spinifex grass in a dimly lit, like moonlit sort of enclosure with rock stuff, and then there's your Strophuris gecko on the grass blades hunting crickets at night.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah, I caught myself looking at a post. Fortunately, they were sold, but it was from like earlier this month. The guys at Sim Container posted a pair of Pagona Henry Lawsoni, the dwarf Rankins dragons. There was a pair of them, and I was like, "Ooh, that would be cool." I've got a 40-gallon front open, and I'm like, "Ooh, I could set that up, and do some foam rock work here, and to do something. And I was like, nah, stay focused, Riley. You've already veered off course like 5 times this year.
Yeah, right. You went colubrids and
Dude, I was looking at it. I was like, okay, I bought MIA jungles this year.
right.
That wasn't planned, but that's, I guess, still on course.
Right.
Somehow Doomeral's boas ended up in my lap. Corn
Wow, that's cool.
snakes. I wasn't planning on expanding the Brettles pythons, but here we are. And then some Mac lots. I'm just like, what? Where did I go wrong?
Yeah, I like to just put it to where it's like, okay, I'm gonna focus on Australia stuff that way, except for IJs.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's like, so I'm sort of like in this little world, you know?
Yeah. For me, it's this never-ending, eternal struggle because I see the folks like that I look up to in their style of keeping and their focus, and I want to emulate them. And so, like, the pendulum swings back to that focus, and then it goes right back to like veering off course, and then comes back, and then right back to veering off course. And I think it's just me fighting the fact that I love having variety as much as I envy the folks who can focus.
I completely agree. Yeah, I veered off course with the false water cobra stuff, but I'm not mad about it. My friend was roasting me. She was like, "I've been seeing a lot more false water cobras than Brettles pythons on your Instagram, buddy."
Once you go big colubrid, man, or colubrid, I'm gonna say both just to keep people guessing. Once you go big colubrid, it's really hard to ever look at things differently, man. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna look back on when that thing was a baby. When that thing is like 7 feet long, you're gonna trip, dude.
Probably need the biggest enclosures that I will own. Will be for the falsies.
They will use every inch of it, man. Back in Santa Barbara at the zoo, the enclosure, it wasn't quite big enough for me to stand in. It was probably 4.5 feet tall, 3 feet wide, and 8 or 10 feet long. And it had a big pool in the bottom that they'd use all the time, a rock wall in the back that they'd climb up, a branch that perched all the way across, and you could catch them basking under UV on the log because we had UV. You could catch them soaking in the pool. They'd always go to the bathroom in the pool for the most part, but like just unbelievably active, and every inch of space you give them, they will use it. And it's, again, like I said, it's one of those species that once you start doing things for it, you start thinking differently and you can never go back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And certainly a species that it seems like will utilize the UV. And I've been observing that since I hooked up this cage here with some UV.
Yeah.
It's just a different vibe to have a diurnal, active, sight-based predator versus like a nocturnal ambush predator. Completely different. If that's the only non-Australian thing I have going on, I think I'm doing okay.
Just for now.
Yeah.
Give it time.
Yeah.
For now.
I don't know. It's like the colubrids, like they pull me in, right? And I'm like, wow, they're cool. I dig this. I like this. But like, I guess it's like, I think like I have limited time to do stuff. So stay focused, it's like, stay focused. Yeah.
Eric, didn't you mention something about a new room in your house?
Yeah. 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 Slowly taking over. Well, I was thinking about my diamond pythons, right? And I'm trying to find, so I have the AP cages, as you can sort of see, right? But I was going to do them naturalistic, but the problem is that they're not tall enough, right? So because they're not tall enough, I can't get basking. I can't get like the ledges and stuff like that. So I actually, we were talking just a minute ago about Luke, but if you look at his diamond python cages on Beach's Scaly Beasts is his YouTube. He has those real tall diamond python cages, and you can cohab diamonds probably better than other carpets because the males don't combat, if you will. So I'm thinking about like making this big, huge, like right in that wall, like building a like a big, huge, just all the way to the ceiling cage with big, huge perches in it, and ledges to where they can bask and UV lights, and I think that's what I'm going towards.
That's awesome.
That would be so cool.
See how that turns out.
Yeah, if only I'd been shown the light before I filled up this whole room.
With diamond pythons?
Just in general, like just my keeping style, because now, like, I would love to do that for everything, really. Like, I mean, let's be real. If I'm gonna be breeding, I'm it's either gonna be quality in small groups or doing fun stuff and going big. But I think, like you're doing, transitioning into that sort of aesthetically pleasing but behaviorally tuned in approach to keeping, I think that's kind of reminiscent of the shift we're seeing in the hobby. And I think I find a lot of that enjoyable as well. The more I see other people doing it, the more fun it seems,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I think, I don't know what it is with me, but like currently I have like this, I can't get started with snakes. I don't know what it is. It's in my brain. So I'm like, okay, to kickstart this thing, I'm going to go with the monitors, right? And do it. And then say, okay, now I know I can do it. And then, add in, I'll start with the diamonds and go from there. But how badass
in terms of the enclosures? Like,
yeah. I mean, like, I have all these ideas with the designs and this and that. And like, I don't know. I'm weird that way. It takes me a while to like process the thing before I pull the trigger,
That's probably a good trait.
Well, do you have a space where you could, like, for example, set up the empty monitors enclosure and use it as your workspace as you're like sculpting, scaping, and building it all before they come in, and you can just like have this thing sort of evolve and have your visual aid as you're sort of mentally sort of deciphering how you want to do it, and as you go, you're learning about the process of what you're building and how, like in a garage or something.
Yeah, that's what I sort of started. I started, again, figuring I'll mess around with this. It's, I don't know, it's like maybe a 40-gallon enclosure, whatever it is. So I'm going to start with that, see how it goes, and then sort of jump off of there. And then, because I can't find anything of what it's either not long enough, it's not deep enough, it's not tall enough. There's always some kind of something, and like, I don't know. And then, I guess you could get stuff personally made, but
but then you're dealing with the word custom.
Yeah. I wish I had the tools and like know how to build stuff myself. That seems like it would be very helpful for what we do, but I don't have a wood shop.
You need table saws, you need space.
The good thing is like, that's when I came up in the hobby, that's how you did it. There wasn't cages or stuff like that, so you had no choice but to sort of learn those things. And I mean, you're only making a box, can't be
right.
It
doesn't have to be too complicated.
But it's not as easy as you might think,
Right. No, it never is.
No.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
And I may still keep certain things in racks. I think with like selective breeding with IJs and stuff like that, I don't know, it's to keep a group that size, and it's going to require some space,
of course,
to be made, and so I figure I'll have like 2 main showcase rooms, and then one sort of what I would call breeding baby room type of thing.
Not to like bring it back to that one rant I had, but we all need to just pause and accept that racks are a part of the hobby, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think anybody that's trying to progress a project, breeding in a realistic timeline in any sort of way that's more than just a pair of animals, that's where racks come into play. So I don't see anything wrong with anybody, ethically agreeing with the benefit to having full spectrum lighting and cages and all this stuff, and having a couple things set up aside. But like if they're really trying to breed something and that's their projects, why is that bad to do it in racks? So I think the social stigma against, you know, one or the other is bull crap. I think that needs to go by the wayside. And if you want to have, you know, display rooms with beautiful like roughies and diamonds and all these things set up, and then still have like the breeding room, dude, more power to you. And anybody who's going to talk smack about it's just like, whatever. They're just not, they haven't caught up yet, you know, because that's the reality. Like anybody who wants that affordable carpet python or that affordable false water cobra or that affordable crebo or whatever it is, you know, it's because somebody's breeding them in racks. I'm sorry to say it. So that's just the reality of it. So I'm all for it, man. Like I've got some display cages. I've got stuff in the living room for a few animals just for the heck of it. And then, you know, even in here, some animals are in cages, some are in racks. It's just the way of the world. So
yeah. It's one of those things. I mean, I understand it, but at the same time, it's sort of that thing, you know, if you're going to breed on any kind of scale, you have to sort of think about that, you know?
And that goes back to that other engineering project we were talking about where someone needs to design a rack that is a cage with with all the full spectrum lighting and whatnot. And then we can highlight them on the show. So
you know, so ZoomEd makes those T5 slim hoods that are like, I've measured them. They're like maybe 1.5 inches or so. And although, you know, COVID related product and chain chokes and supply issues right now, I have seen a Freedom Breeder rack that was made for UC Davis doing some giant garter snake work in one of their private buildings that it looked like it was set up for venomous because it had like a door for each tub, like where the top had like a mesh closing part, and it was spaced just enough where they had because they wanted it as part of their requirements for their study to have these animals have access to UVB. And so they had it in just, you know, your drawer style racks, but with the venomous mesh sort of top hood in it, had just enough room for a T5 strip to fit the whole way. So in essence, you could still pull each drawer out without upsetting or you know, disturbing a light, and every single tub had access to UVB. Now, I don't think that that's necessarily feasible for everybody because we're talking Freedom Breeder, you know, stainless and prices related to all of that. But you know, that would be really cool if there was some way to make that a mass produced way. Like, you know, if in every single one of these shelves, you know, what if like every rack, each shelf was 3 inches thick instead of just the 3/4 inch PVC or whatever. And what it did was allowed for a built-in UVB housing that had some sort of, you know, like strip that prevents animals from getting out, but it allows the UV to go through. Not, you know, doesn't
you just need a certain amount of clearance for that.
Yeah. And then the other thing, we need technology to get on like a much better UVB output, because right now what we have, like the best bulbs require replacement out of, you know, 6 months to a year, and they're not consistent as far as their output. And, you know, sometimes they blow and sometimes they're too hot. And like, so it's technology isn't with the ideas just yet. So there's this disconnect. So until somebody can come up with like, you know, like these cuttable LED light strips like this that you can get, but it's UVB output and it's just like zoop, like a little sticker of it. Until somebody makes this in
that
UVB,
would be nice.
How cool would that be?
That's the future. We just got to figure out the process to get there. Until somebody can reinvent UVB output to come out of tiny little things like this, it's going to be a battle. So
certainly, yeah, good points.
Yeah, well,
the coffee's kicked in.
Chop with that, you know. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Man.
You know, I could see some folks working on it. You know, Freedom Breeder's making a big change right now. They're adding a second building to their property. They're getting rid of the majority, if not all, of their ball pythons. They're going to really just shift all their yeah. They've been talking about it for a while. They finally announced it publicly, but they're selling off a lot of the ball pythons to focus on the rack production and take it up, because they've had to back order stuff. I mean, so there's so much attention and good marketing for them and other companies out there right now, and with the demand going through the roof, financially, it just makes more sense for them to keep putting the eggs in the rack basket instead of snakes, because that's their bread and butter. So, and then rodents, they do a lot of rodents for the state out here too. So,
yeah, I guess that makes sense. Why try to compete in such a saturated type yeah, I was trying to think of a different word to use, but yeah, like why try to compete with that?
Well, and there's no guarantee in sales with the snakes too,
right?
Like you don't have a backlog of snake sales. It's not like you've got 50 orders for pieds, or whatever. You got 50 orders for these $3,000 racks though. Like that's a no-brainer. So even if you've got enough animals where you're producing year round, it's still like the dividends are different. So I think they're working with folks like Garrett Hartle from Reach Out Reptiles to work on arboreal racks that are like glass front, but also a tub tray in the bottom. Garrett's got a prototype there. I think that's a great idea. Again, the stainless aspect of it's going to, have some cost implications on things, but I think we're in a progressive time.
So I saw that that sort of hybrid thing that he has. I've seen him talk about it on YouTube and stuff, and I don't know. I guess at the point when it becomes so tall, like, what's the advantage of it being a tub? You know what I mean? Like, why not just go cage?
Yeah,
I don't. Maybe I'm not seeing how that would evolve. But I just like, if you're gonna slide the drawer out to change the substrate, I don't know. Most of my snakes would probably be in the drawer, so it kind of would. I don't know.
Or especially if you've got stuff that doesn't clear the lip, or like if your snake's perched on something that goes across.
Right. So at that point, what would be the difference of just having open doors of a cage?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess.
I mean, cost maybe, depending on how much a unit like that costs.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the panels on the side are cheaper than doing glass, and it's easier to manufacture than glass. I don't know, glass is pretty cheap, but
well, if it's a pricing thing, then yeah. I mean, if it's going to be substantially cheaper, then okay, I would see the point. But from just the design of it, like I don't know. I guess if I kept all like green trees or something like that, where they're going to be consistently, or emeralds or something where they're consistently perched. Yeah, that would be easiest. You don't even have to disturb the snake. You just pull the drawer out, change the whatever, and put it back.
Right.
Yeah, I guess the tray on the bottom concept, it reminds me of two things. One, it reminds me of like a chameleon tray basin for cleaning, for easy cleaning, and it reminds me of like with rodents, keeping mammals on like a false bottom so everything falls through, so you can clean out the poop out the bottom. But then there's no guarantee these animals aren't going to be on the bottom, so you have to be strategic about when you clean. So yeah, I guess it doesn't get around that pitfall. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're still calibrating what the market's asking for, because we don't want it to look like a rack, but we want the efficiency of a rack. But if you go buy cages and put it on a baker's rack that looks like ghetto and janky, and like you're not
I'm not professional.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, get the fuck out of here. What do you think all the pros did back in the day? They got neodeshes and put them on a metal rack or built a wooden rack. It's like, it's all the same thing. It's a psychological, like, never-ending game of just running around the bush, pointing fingers and throwing stones at one another, because essentially at the end of the day, a rack is just stacking whatever enclosure it is. A cage is no different than a tub. It's just a different access point and a different material that it's made of. That's literally it.
And look, I mean, you can put together, if we're thinking of enclosures in terms of evidence-based keeping and enrichment and welfare, you can put together a cage that's garbage, like just like a water bowl and paper, nothing else in there,
How many times do you see that on Craigslist? Oh, rehoming my ball python. I don't have time for it. It's a hammerhead behind a bowl and nothing. And
right. And whereas you can also set up a rack very well if you have plenty of things in there for that particular species, right? So, it really, when it comes down to it, like you just said, a box is a box. I think personally it matters a lot more with what you do with it.
Yeah.
What you put in it.
Well, yeah, I guess my point is that it seems like the hobby is moving more towards, especially it's good to see snake keepers sort of moving their ball, right? Because, I mean, if you listen back to the early days of NPR, we've talked about it forever that like, monitor people, frog people are all like, like light years ahead of us. And, they're paying attention to things like UVB and lights for the plants and bioactive and bringing out certain behaviors that the animal will do and highlighting those behaviors. And again, just like I used to say back in the day, mostly for our enjoyment to watch the animal. But I guess now it's being shown that, providing more and more enrichment for the animal gives a healthier life. I think about all the times of coming up in the hobby and, snakes getting cancer or they're prone to dying at 10 years old. Is that obesity? One thing that I have noticed with my snakes from keeping them in racks is that the prehensile strength of their tail has sort of diminished over time. So my thinking is like, you can just sort of feel it on the end, like as opposed to my diamond pythons, which always have their tail wrapped around a perch, something it's like tight and it's holding on because they know if something comes along, they have to use that anchor to sort of like, okay, prey's coming, boom, but the snakes in racks don't have that.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just like anything,
right?
Yeah, it's like using your muscles and working out. If you don't work out every day, eventually over time, your muscles will deteriorate. So I don't know. I think that I'm not saying that a snake is going to die because its tail isn't strong enough, but like you would think that the overall health of the animal will be improved by things like that, So I'm with you, Lucas, when it's like a box is a box. It's what you're doing in the box that, to me, that matters, because if you're providing that perch or whatever it would be, or the hide box or the humidity that it needs to get, or, that's another touch button with carpet python people is humidity. Is it necessary? I don't know. I mean, it's freaking humid in Australia. I can tell you that. So like, I don't know.
Yeah. And letting the natural history dictate what you think you need to do in that box, right? What I do for snake A does not necessarily mean that's what I'll do for snake B,
Yeah.
So here's a question. If you could, without limitation of cost, if you had a massive facility to do this and had people to do it for you exactly how you wanted, would you give every single animal and set it up racks, but cages or big spaces, even for babies, set up a facility where you had like the capacity to have 200 babies in little enclosures and everything going up, every animal, the capacity to have UV and overhead basking light, like naturalistic, at least as far as the setup goes, and do an entire facility like that and raise everything up. Okay, so I think we all agree that we would love that, right?
Yes.
So that's ideal. We're somewhere here. Yeah. There's a trajectory that we're still on to figure out how we can marry those two approaches. Yeah. The difference being everybody's access to those resources and cost and time and all that stuff. So I think there's a realistic spectrum and then there's a financial spectrum, but I think we all agree that we would love to do that. Yeah. And I think just even keeping that in mind and trying to push the hobby forward in little ways where people who aren't, so financially well off to do that stuff is the best, we can keep trying to do until we get there. Because eventually it's gonna keep getting better.
Mm-hmm. I think too, at least for me, there's a little bit of a tug of war match between knowing what's best and just being addicted and a hoarder. Like I think to an extent we're all a little bit that, and we got to call it what it is.
Of course.
But just trying to do the best we can.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very true. The whole idea of, I have to have the whole set. I have to have the whole, whatever it would be, I think, at least for me, that's always been a struggle for me. It's like, I've just recently started to pull away from that. Like I got rid of all my Jags. It's like, okay, I don't need Jags. So I'm going to start with them. So they all get, the boot, and dude, that's I'm telling you what, man, that is the greatest move I ever made. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, it's just that I think that like people eventually get there. It's just a matter of just continually to put out good information, not knock people down about what their decisions are, like try to, I don't know, just a better way of getting them to see the better way. I mean, Scott, he made two comments that are so on point. Carpet pythons are a bad example of this because they're so they adapt to everything.
That's
very
true.
In the wild, I mean, most of the time, if you're finding a carpet python, it's in somebody's shed or their backyard or on their fence or, it's in their attic, whatever it would be. So, yeah, they're just going to adapt, and when we did the Student of the Serpent, we were talking with Justin Julander, and we were talking about Woma pythons. And one of the things that he brought up was that, Woma pythons are not as adaptive as carpets, right? So they're stuck in this more of a specific habitat for them that they've, been able to make work for millions of years. But, if that habitat is gone, they'll probably be gone as well, whereas carpets, you could build all the houses you want and they're just going to live in your yard or your shed or your attic or whatever, so
right.
That just made me like wander mentally into like womas live in sand, keeping animals on sand. Oh, how the hobby hates keeping animals on sand.
So
now
it's funny.
I can't wait till I get womas, dude, because we're breeding some at the shop, and that one really nice reduced pattern female, she is like, she's done. She's done.
Really?
Oh yeah.
She's going. The other one,
I love
historically
that
goes later, so she will go later. One way or another, I'm getting a pair. You bet your ass I'm putting them on sand.
All right.
Yeah. The cool thing that I'm trying to read the comments and at the same time, the cool thing that I saw about Woma pythons and putting them on sand was, I think I want to say it was somebody in Australia or something, but they had this like really awesome setup, this like burrow, and the substrate was sand. And there's the Woma python scooping the sand out, right, of that burrow with its neck. And I'm like, wow, you would never see that.
Yeah.
Even if you kept it in a 4 foot by 2 foot cage, you're not going to see it if you don't have that kind of substrate or that kind of setup. So you're not going to, you're going to miss those behaviors.
I'll never forget you sending me that video. It made such a huge
man, it was wild.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And then reading the paper, I can't remember what her name was, but it's sort of like what we based the whole Student of the Serpent Woma episode off of. But they talked about just different behaviors that these Woma pythons would do, up to the point of like the dragons would be sleeping on, spinifex or like, logs or whatever. And the Woma pythons would go and eat those lizards right at night off of the, so they're hunting and whatever. And like, they've adapted all these things that the fact that like when you would never think of a Woma python as being arboreal, right? I didn't. And then they're finding them in trees. And there's just like, wow.
Yeah, that blew my mind. I had to go find that paper. It's the Melissa Breton paper, right?
Yes, that's it. I'll send it to you if you don't.
Dude, if the water over there
right here.
If the water over there was 80 degrees, womas would live in water. Dude, those things, you want to talk about, I don't know, man. Those things are adaptable as shit. I'm sorry. Those things will breed a rope. They'll eat whatever. They'll eat your cell phone. As long as it's warm, they're like, we're good. They're tough as nails, man. That's a badass snake. But yeah, they definitely are limited as far as their range goes. So they definitely have some sensitivities, clearly. But
yeah.
One of the points. I just want to throw this out there. Is just one of the points that Summer said is like, and I think this is what we were saying earlier. If you're a commercial breeder, admit that the way you keep snakes is because it's practical. And that's so true. I mean, I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it, but if you're going to breed on this kind of scale, you know, I think the biggest shift is that it's moving away from, you know, this idea that you have to breed to people just keeping, you know, and yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and if people are asking advice from breeders on how they keep, they shouldn't be surprised when they get the breeding approach to their style of keeping, i.e. racks or more efficient approaches. If you ask somebody who's keeping a pair or just a pet, you're going to get a completely different answer. As long as the parameters are the same, you've got a spectrum that you can cover as far as the style of, like, you know, fully tub style all the way up to cage for most species. You know, like a lot of girls, boas, keepers, or breeders probably do it in tubs and rack systems, just a bigger system. And then the family that produced, you know, my pair out here, the dad's a cabinet maker. He's got a big floor to ceiling, freaking like massive display with a huge tree in it and these drawers in the bottom that pull out to nest bins. And we're talking ground boas that are climbing up for basking, going back down, and they had a huge 22 baby litter, and they're phenomenal. So, you know, you can do kind of whatever you want as long as you play with the natural history of the animal.
Man, I remember when I was a kid, my dad, he went and, again, this is before commercial caging or anything like that was available. So what he did is he had this huge, I want to say, like, think of like maybe a 150-gallon aquarium, right? So basically, I could lay in it, which I know hobbits, I'm small, whatever. I can fit and wave my hands around or whatever. But, you know, being able to actually lay down in it and be able to, like, sort of turn around. So what he did is he took it to some place where they took the glass out, right? It took the glass out. So it was just the metal frame. I don't know if you remember, you might be too young for this, but back in the day when they made fish tanks, it was like this stainless steel border that they had, whereas today they don't really have it. It's just glass touches glass, you know.
Right.
But he got the glass removed and he put wood around it, and he made this. He turned it, instead of it being this way, he turned it this way, and he put mangrove snakes in it.
Nice.
Oh,
cool.
man, it was badass, man. It was really cool. He had like all these. He had like a fake tree in there that he got and built, and you know, it was so cool. You know, you just stand there and watch it forever. You can see the snakes go up, you know, come down, you know, it would be hunting, all that kind of stuff. It was really cool.
Yeah.
But
that reminds me of seeing some of the videos that Kevin McCurley used to show of his emerald tree boas. It looks like he took AP cages and turned them on their sides, and he's got a whole wall of them. It looks like a bunch of cages turned on their sides, and there's perches horizontally. It's like water on the bottom in a bin, and just plants and basking, and the animals just go up and down. And it was kind of a pretty interesting idea. And then the other thing it reminded me of are the vertical, like you take the hide and put it on the ceiling of a cage and have the little clasp that slides in. And dude, see, that's the ingenuity that's coming around these days. I get so geeked when I see people
I saw
ideas like that.
Yeah, I saw somebody, what they did was they did that same type of thing. I can't remember who the video was. And it's not somebody that's like really popular on YouTube, but I just had stumbled upon it just to try to get ideas. But basically what they did is they made this hide box, but they made the hide box so that it was on the outside of the cage and you could open a door. And when you open the door, there was like a bin that was in it. And basically this would be like the egg laying box. But what he did was he ran like this PVC pipe up to sort of like, I guess, like sort of like a like he made a rock face out of like the what is that stuff called? The tough stuff or what, you know, like the foam.
Right,
that expanding foam.
Right.
Yeah.
Expanding foam. So he sort of surrounded that with that stuff. And so when you look at it in the cage, it's just like this, you know, it's similar to like what Matt Somerville did with those with the cracked beach and all, where he had like this tubes that went down and snakes would go down into the burrows down at the bottom. But he did that, and like the snake could go in there. You still are able to like you know, you can open it and see what the snake is doing without the snake coming out at you. But I thought, man, that is that is so cool, because you're still getting that breeder side of it, and you're not really, you know, you're making it easy to clean, because it's just going right into a tub, right? and it's got sphagnum moss in there, and it's, you know, set up like that. So I'm sure humidity was good and all that stuff. But on the outside, for what you saw in the cage, it just looked like there's this rock and there's a hole in the rock and the snake goes into the thing. I was like, man, that is just so cool.
You could do that, man. That's super doable. LA Zoo does that with a lot of their venomous stuff in the behind the scenes. So if you go to the LA Zoo years ago, they redid it. It's called a lair, living amphibians, invertebrates, and reptiles. It's this like big, massive overhaul of their whole reptile displays. It's fantastic. And for example, one of their mamba enclosures, because it's a walk-in enclosure floor to ceiling, one thing on the door, they've got a 360-degree peephole. But what they do is they've got the snakes conditioned to going into, exactly like you said, like a little porthole into a shift box for feeding. So they'll feed them in that shift box. So the snakes go into this shift box that's attached to the back wall behind the scenes. They can close the guillotine door, lock this entire box, take it off the enclosure wall, and then service the enclosure safely while the animal's eating undisturbed in a locked, secured box. Nice. Put it back in, and they never have to put hooks on the animal or anything. The snake can come and go voluntarily, and you could absolutely use that exact same approach for anything, whether it just be feeding, for venomous, just for a hide box, just for fun, for a high stress snake, anything.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah,
I think that, you know, I'm thinking of species like Halmahera pythons, where it's like they're super shy and super, you know, hard to establish and such, and maybe something like that will, you know, give you the ability to keep them not as stressed, because we all know what stress does.
Yes.
That would probably, if I had like space on the side, that would be interesting to try with the Madagascar hognose, because they're super high stress all the time too. At least the wild caught adults are. They're assholes. They're like, they still full cobra hood, fling pea, and do the whole thing at me. So they would really benefit from that.
Nice.
Yeah. I finally, I don't know if I sent you the picture, but I finally moved my bookshelf.
Ooh. Oh, nice.
Look at all them books.
Wow.
That's awesome.
You're going to need to go around the whole wall and get one of those like roller library ladders that swings and whee on the track.
Oh, man, you've been hanging around Owen
in racks.
Oh, how dare you.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, this book, this one.
There he goes.
Look at the
size.
Arizona.
No, snakes of Arizona.
Ooh.
Look how thick that is.
Holy crap. Damn.
It came. So Nipper was super nice and sent me this for Christmas, and he bought one as well. I guess he can't buy it over in the UK, so now I have to ship it to him. And it comes up, right? And there's 2 of these in the box, and I'm like, what the hell is in this box?
It's like a 10-pound box.
They did an amazing job. They did an amazing job with
that.
I
saw photos of it online. I didn't realize the size of it until just now. That's huge.
Have either of you guys herped in Arizona before?
No. Supposed to go this year.
Yeah.
I've been there and chased fence lizards around my cousin's yard.
Totally.
I don't think that counts.
I had 3 days in Tucson a year ago, September, and I was trying to find rattlesnakes. I was herping, and all I found was a really cute little scorpion. Couldn't find any snakes. But
man, I was actually out there. I was out there the perfect time of year. I was out there for spring training for baseball.
Nice.
It would have been perfect time
to do that too.
I don't know how many species of snake are there, but man, I mean, this book is I was talking to Rob about it, and I was like, Rob, this book is so thick. Like, how many species are there? It must be all snakes. No wonder everybody wants to go there. But
there's like 13 species of rattlers out there, right?
I think so. Yeah.
It's definitely
It's on the list to go. So hopefully this year we can make it happen.
It's an easier place for Riley and I to meet you.
Yeah,
it's on our side.
Yeah, exactly. That's an easy road trip.
Yeah, we were talking about our Australia trips, and like trying to figure out when is that going to come around again, or like what's the next trip going to be or whatever.
Mhm.
And you know, me and him were like really jonesing about going back up to like the Cape York, and he already has the itinerary laid out. And I'm like, dude, man, he's like, would you go? And I'm like, dude, that's carpet python Mecca right there. I mean, like, it's like just chock full of carpet pythons in that whole area. And to see maybe a green tree,
Right.
Yeah.
like, dude, how badass would that be? So we're going back and forth, and we're talking, and we're like, wow, we really don't have that many species to tick off as far as pythons in Australia. And like, if we got that trip and saw a spotted python, we're at nine
Wow.
species.
Nice.
Damn.
Yeah. So
Hop over to the Kimberley.
Yeah.
Find roughies.
Yeah.
yeah, if we can find them, that's an easy. The rest would be easy.
Yeah. Well, your track record for rare species is currently good.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just like, because I know, Riley, you got your money back, and I still haven't done anything with my ticket. So I'm like, does it
Dude. I'm
stay in
itching to
limbo
go.
for another year, or I'm not sure.
I'm hoping this year, this coming year, 2021, allows international travel to open up without that 2-week quarantine period. You know, assuming this whole phase with the vaccines and things sort of turns a corner for the world as far as the COVID stuff is concerned, and
You'll have your little vaccine card to let you on the plane,
something, whatever it is. You know what? God damn it! I hope they don't make us get a vaccine just to travel internationally. I'm kind of like on the fence about it, but that's another story. We're not going to get into
that's
that.
another topic.
I have to stick that needle in my arm to get to Australia. So be it.
I know that's kind of where my head's at. As much as I'm begrudging, I feel like fuck it.
I'll take yours, Riley. Just put it in me now.
But the thing is, like, dude, I've got all the gear still sitting next to my freaking bed from when I was like 3 days ready to go. 3 days, it's sitting literally right there. Like, my Camelback is still packed with everything ready to freaking go.
I was so excited.
That's just a reminder of pain.
I was so excited. I was so excited. Like, oh, Riley's going to lose his fucking mind, man. He's just going to go crazy. Oh my God. Because when you're excited about something and then you watch somebody else that's excited about the same thing, you get even more excited, and you're like, this is great.
And I was so overworked at the time. I was ready to be quarantined and stuck over there for however long it took. I was ready. I was screw it. Take me. Take me.
So I think we kind of decided that, if Australia did open, it wouldn't open until, later in 2021, so we're kind of like looking 2022, which gives Owen enough time to save up for the Kimberley trip.
That helps me out too. If 2021 ends up being the year where I buy a house, I'm going to need some time to recover financially.
And
a house, more room.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know how many snakes are in here? Do you know the square footage with how many snakes? It's not a good number.
You have to calculate snake per inch.
Okay, that might, I don't know. Those numbers are devastating.
That reminds me of my early days when I had this little bedroom apartment as my snake room, and basically I had every inch of that room.
Yep.
With some kind of cage or mostly racks and stuff. Yep. With just like everything. And Owen used to make fun of me because I used to have to get like, just like you were saying earlier with the library thing, the ladder that scrolls down. You're like, hold on, I know where that snake is.
Yep. Well, I've got space right here. I could easily fit another 5 or 6 V70 little, so that I'm looking at, and more hatchling racks. So I'm not done. I will squeeze every damn inch out of this room while I'm here. That's for damn sure.
But when you move and you get a bigger room, you're just going to be like, oh my God.
Well, so the plan is to make as much efficient space or use of this space as possible. And if things go well and I finish paying off my car in the next couple months and we get into a house and I've got the room, what I want to do is actually not buy animals, but buy caging. And I remember seeing the Anthony Caponetto 3-foot carpet cages, and I wanna get to a system where I have like all my females in cages, whether they're 4 foot or 3 foot, because I've got some small females, and then I'd like to have males in small cages as well, and make use of some shelves and things so I can be just as efficient as the rack, but afford them a little more moving room, and then just do babies in hatchling racks, babies and like yearlings sort of thing. So I want, the looking forward to the house is more of like getting more towards what we were just talking about earlier, and that's doing a little bit more towards the spatial side and like opening up things for the existing animals, because truth be told, like, we're never satisfied with the animals we could keep, right? There's always something we'd love to have, and most of what I want really is either at your house, Eric, or with Nick. So it's like I've got a good focus, a good scope on things, and so like next I'd love to see just this mature a little bit more.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sort of why I got sort of stuck up in. It's like I think if I were to do it over again, I think when I was getting into it, I sort of like I jumped in and I just bought just as many as I could of whatever it would be, let's say carpet pythons. It's like I didn't work a project and then move on to the next project. It was like I was working like 20 projects at once. And it's like when you're trying to balance that, I find that you lose. I don't know. For me, I sort of lost. I lost the edge, I guess, if you will. And then I would see people with a smaller collection, just come out of the gate, just like gun. Like if you take me and Owen, right? Like if you look at Owen, right? So I say this all to him all the time, right? He's caramel carpets, right? So we got caramels at the same time, but he was like, that's what he did. He focused on these caramels, and his caramels are unbelievable. Like they're amazing. And I don't think he gets enough credit for his caramels that he produces. And especially if it's all the ones he started with. Yeah. They were dirt ugly, man. They were just ugly, and but in the meantime, I'm like doing albino, I'm doing this, I'm doing zebra granite that, and da-da-da-da-da, and I got to put the citrus tiger and I get the and all this stuff. And you're like, he's just like, all I'm doing is caramels. And it's like, he's got the finished product, and I'm over here like, well, I have the animals to make it. I just haven't it yet,
Yeah.
So
that's where that same internal turmoil I have comes from. It's the specialized versus spreading yourself out into all the projects you want to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
I like, Summer made a good point. I made a rule for myself that I wasn't allowed to buy any more animals until I got all my current animals in cages. Well, she did it. Now,
now you're free.
Yeah. So that's a great example. Like that's perfect. That's kind of like somebody who really focused, put their mind towards a goal and did it. And I think that's absolutely commendable. I think I did the same thing as you, Eric. When I first jumped in, I was like, carpet. I need this, need that, that. Gimme. And I had the most random ass collection of Morelia in 2014 and 2015 that made no sense. And it's changed considerably. But looking at how many different projects I've got going, I've got like 5 or 6 different, species, subspecies projects and things going. And I'm wondering if I would have been more successful had I focused more on like 1 or 2 at the time. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because my albino Darwin's actually using her log for the first time in like 8 months.
Ah,
there you go.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I don't know. It's funny how you learn, at least for me, I learned these things by making the mistakes, but there was nobody really there sort of like pushing you in a direction, I mean, like when I was coming in back into the hobby, most of what everything was about was breeding. If you weren't a breeder, if you weren't breeding something cool, then you were just not cool. There was very few people that were keepers. And I don't know, the older I get, the more I find that I'm actually more fascinated with the behavior of the snakes or the reptiles or whatever it would be than the actual breeding part of it. The breeding part is like, I did that and it was great. and I will still breed. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to breed, but it's not going to be that rat race, I guess, if you will. And that's kind of like this year. I don't even know if I'm going to breed. You know, I think the 1 year that I took off, I was still worried about taking the year off. Like, oh my God, everybody's going to be ahead of me. You know, that mindset, man. Like everybody has that mindset back in the day. Like, I'm going to lose a year of production and I'm going to lose it. And how am I going to? Everybody's not.
And then you had a home run year.
You should still
and then
produce the Tullies, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, stuff like that. You have to. But, you know, it's like, do I produce this locality jungle that's super rare in the hobby, or do I worry about, you know, cramming another morph into, you know, a carpet, if you will? I don't know. Yeah. It seems like that has sort of phased out of carpets. Do you get that feeling? I kind of feel that. Like,
I don't feel a pull towards morph stuff really.
Yeah.
I see
and
it
I say
out
that
there.
as somebody that has only been into this for a few years, but yeah.
You still see some of it. Yeah, you still see some of it, but it's not like.
Remember how it was like, say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, I do.
Everybody hated each other and they're always yelling at each other. And it's like such tension. If you're friends with this guy, you can't be friends with that one. And, you know, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Sounds like high school.
It was interesting. Well, and it was so divided too. Like if you were a purist, you couldn't be friends with people who mixed shit, and like you had to pick one or the other. And like I always rode the fence on that, but I had friends that were purists, and then I knew the whole, you know, the ethics behind it and the reasons for and why people don't care. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. This is hectic.
Wait. Who do I be friends with? I don't know.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was overwhelming. And
I think that has moved out. I don't really see, you know, I have more people hit me up about a poplin carpet than I do about, and maybe that's just that, you know.
No, that's true, dude. That's
me for
reality.
That. But I don't hear anybody like, yo, man, do you have like an albino zebra granite jag or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But
I think people are starting to appreciate things, you know, without morphs a lot more nowadays. I think that's just it was inevitable that the pendulum would swing back, right? It's just now I think we're really seeing it. And you know, I mean, I remember when we first started, you know, people were getting rid of poplins. I remember talking to Todd like 5 years ago, and he didn't even have any IJs, any poplins, because like you couldn't sell them because at the time people thought they were just dirt snakes that weren't even worth $100.
Yeah,
so
nobody cared.
Yeah, so he, you know, over time moved them all out of his collection, and nowadays, you know, you can't find them. They're hard to get. Everybody wants them, and they're, you know, no longer $100-$200 snakes. They're like elusive and, you know, lineage quality driven and, you know, good stock driven. There's value and there's variety and there's enough people behind them. It's made it, you know, sort of open people's eyes. So like, dude, these aren't just another brown snake. These are the one carpet you can import. They are the one carpet that, you know, you can still get new blood in. They are the one carpet that hasn't been completely like overworked by everybody and you know, hasn't hit some pinnacle. It's like untapped potential with so much more there that it's just, I think people are finally waking up to that fact.
Yeah, it's like you know, one of the things that Rob used to say to me when we first started talking to each other is like he appreciated my vision, right? So he could see where IJs would go, whereas everybody else is like, you know, it was so crazy because I would be talking to people about them and they would be like, sort of like what you said. I would be talking to guys like Todd or Jason Balin or like, you know, as we were at Tinley Park and everybody's like, they're just bullshit dirt snakes. Who cares about them? Look at this, you know? And it's just like, yeah, but I like these, you know, like wait till a couple years, you'll see, you know, the orange will pop, this will pop. And I don't know. I think there's a few people like I'm not necessarily a ball python person, but I think of Kabelka and like his vision that he has is like, it's like second to none, like with where he sees a project going and trying to get to there. Keith McPeak, Matt Minatola, those guys, all people that have like this vision of like, oh, I'm going to take this. Oh, look, it has a little orange spot here. I'm going to, make this orange like insane. And it's so crazy that carpet people just don't get that with other subspecies. But yet we have the perfect example right in front of our faces when you look at jungle carpets.
Yeah.
I mean, can you get any yellower or black? I mean, I don't know. It just seems, again, it's that vision of saying, okay, this looks like this now. Like the 2 wild caught females I have in quarantine, dude, the orange on these things are just insane. And they're from the wild, like
straight off the dirt.
I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, that's badass. I think that's the coolest part about it, is because you have a closer connection with the animals and their wild counterparts and where they came from. Some people might actually have issues with that being wild caught, but you look into the wild caught status of IJs and popwoods, it's actually pretty fairly well regulated, and it's always coming in under quota, I think, as far as how much they're taking out annually. So the demand doesn't exceed what they've calculated as a sustainable removal for the populations out there. So, we'll just interject that and then throw it aside so nobody, thinks we're being insensitive to it. But yeah, you really, because you have something that comes straight out of nature, it's beautiful, you appreciate it for what it is. Exactly that animal hatched out in the wild, hatched out over there, and now is in your care, and you can see that it's beautiful, and you can see what could be refined, and you just have that instant, like, closer connection. And I think that it has something a little more tangible for us.
And, I think there's going to come a time where Indonesia is shut down, and maybe it'll open back up, and, but like, I think for me to have as much diversity as I can in a bloodline, or different bloodlines, or different wild caught animals that I can have as genetic, I can offer a customer the most genetically diverse animal that I can, is kind of the goal. I don't want to get like, I don't see myself importing, like, say, the way they imported ball pythons back in the day. I didn't even know if they still do that. Yeah,
I don't think it happens in mass quantity like that.
Yeah.
I think it does still happen, though, like crates of new wild-caught farm stuff. I think that's an actual sustainable, like, ecotourist type industry over there in some places.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's the other side of that, man. Like when you hear guys like Daniel Natusch talk about the other side of it, the side that we don't see, where, in order for this person to feed his family, or, they go and catch a snake and, they're able to survive for couple months or whatever. I don't know, man. That's such a hard. That's tough. Yeah.
Well, the whole thing about like illegal and smuggling and these terms, they're all human constructs of somebody else's perspective that sort of is supposed to be guided by morality and ethics, and we're told to believe that. And if you really break it down, sometimes it isn't. So you can't just go off like, it can actually be quite beneficial. There's a lot of evidence for conservation type of work going from stimulating and interest in species like that. So it can be very good. But yeah, I mean, like, what about all the guys out in Borneo, the skin traders that are catching short tails and stuff, and that's how they've made their living, was through the skinning trade. And now, there's also a captive bred market. And so, especially with ball pythons, those guys will protect the plots of land where they have those animals out living with their lives, because they'll harvest the babies, put the females back, and that's how they pay for things.
Yeah. So. I think, as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, like, I think the greatest thing that I've done in 2020 is pull myself away from social media. And as far as like not paying attention to the drama or the bullshit, or listen to somebody else tell me how I should keep my snakes, and let me try to figure it out myself and do what works with what I'm visually seeing with that animal. This whole idea that like this cookie cutter approach to keeping animals is it's just silly to me. And I think if you've kept animals on any level, and you've diversified species, you start to see like, okay, I keep 95 IJs this way, but these 5, I have to keep them differently, like I use the example all the time, is I had the Halmahera scrub. And no matter what I did, I kept it in a cage because I thought, it came from the wild and I'm going to try to recreate that as best as I can. And the thing just stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't, so I had to move it to a tub, which, back in those days, even keeping a scrub in a tub was like, scrub in a tub. Yeah. So like, the idea that like, I'm not going to put it in this tub because somebody's going to blast me on Facebook. And meanwhile, I'll just have the animal stress out and die.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It seems silly to me. And after getting established, now, granted, say 10 years from now, the equipment that's here today wasn't available. So, you couldn't keep it. Like, I guess that argument today I might say that maybe providing it with more of a naturalistic setup to where it can get in like various hides or hide back in foliage or stuff like that may have helped that process without moving it to a tub. But, I didn't have that available. So
right. But it's essentially creating the same effect. You're creating a dark, secluded, snug spot that isn't exposed. And that's what the animal wanted.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us have talked about, tub versus racks and all this stuff left and right. But, what's really interesting is, aside from bigger enclosures allowing the snakes the opportunity to exhibit these behaviors if they are comfortable and if all this is available to them, snakes are only out in the open doing stuff when they're looking for food, looking for mates, escaping predators, shedding, whatever it is they're doing. Otherwise, they're trying to be as efficient in survival mode as possible, which is conserve energy and stay out of harm's way.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that best done? Somewhere snug, safe, and secure where they are not exposed on all four sides, above or below. And so that's why rack systems really work well, at least for animals that lack confidence. And I think confidence is something we don't talk about in our animals' behavior because we look at them as just cold-blooded reptiles, very instinctually based. But you can't tell me within a clutch of babies that you see various levels of confidence in the decision making, like why that baby is deciding to hide that way, why that baby is deciding to be out in the open, why that baby took food first, and why that baby waited 6 months. You see various amounts of confidence in these animals, whether they're given the same environment or not. And I think that's where what you just said comes into play. You just have to be able to roll with it and give your animal what they need, regardless of what the cookie cutter approach says, because sometimes animals haven't read the book.
Yes.
The book was written about what they did. And if they're still doing stuff, the book isn't done. So we keep writing the book and rewriting the book and rewriting the book. And that's essentially just being students of the serpent and constantly adjusting.
Yeah, I don't think that we have even scratched the surface with understanding snake behavior and what really makes them tick. I think that there's so much more to learn. I don't know.
And giving credit towards individualization. I mean, like you're saying, they're not robots.
Right.
Each one is different, and that variation is necessary for success in nature, right? Maybe the most confident baby dies because it crawls right out and gets picked off immediately. Maybe the shy one's the one that lives because it was, hiding away. So things like that, I think that variation in behavior and things like that are part of why these animals have been successful for so long, because it casts a wide net to what will work and what won't. Anyway,
Lucas, when you get your first Papuans, you will see how different they are from your bred live, from your soon to be inlands. Yeah, like you will, like I swear, if you set them up the same, they'll do just fine. But I guarantee you're going to get a different set of behaviors out of those animals compared to your Centralians. Like
I believe it. Yeah, and there's probably different behaviors amongst the same Papuan group as well.
Oh, of course, dude. Yeah. Of course. I've got 3 holdbacks for my 2019 clutch, and Two of them, the two females, will like religiously soak and flood their arboreal water bowl to like spill water all over the floor and then sit in an empty water bowl. But they make the whole damn thing saturated.
Right.
But then the male doesn't. He doesn't do that. He'll sit near the water, and if it's like if I overfilled it and he like throws a coil in, it might spill some. But the other two, just because there's condensation on the cage, doesn't mean they've made a mess. I just know that those two spill their water, and that's within like siblings. So
yeah,
totally, yeah.
It's
interesting.
Yeah, it's even within you take carpet pythons, right? My observations have been that I've noticed that Darwin carpets like to be more arboreal. I've noticed that Papuan carpets love to sit in their water bowl. I don't know why. They just do. I've talked to Nick about that multiple times, and that's sort of even stumped him. Like, we were just throwing ideas back and forth. Like, why would this be? Like, why out of all of them would they be one? Are we not keeping them with enough humidity? Is it, or what is lacking that's causing them to do that? So like, and I remember back when I first came into, you talked about the AP cage, right? So it had that shelf in there. And a lot of people would talk a lot of times about, like carpets, like, wanting to perch, but then you would talk to people that keep carpets and it's like, nah, they never use the shelf. They never use that. They never do it. They're just, and then it wasn't until somebody designed the other thing you were talking about earlier, where they put the hide box at the top. Yep. Right. And then it's like, okay, now if you keep a carpet, most of them are going to be hiding in there. So it's about sort of like, I think we sort of like the idea was, okay, we're going to give it perching and we're going to give it this way. Right. And then as soon as it didn't use it, we stopped. You know what I mean? We just were like, oh, okay, they don't like it. And then it became, well, carpets don't need to perch.
Yeah.
So, I think sometimes experimenting with those things and seeing like, I think Lori does a really good job at trying to figure out like what they actually prefer, like what do they actually want to do? And she kind of backs me up on the idea that the Darwins, out of all of them, like to perch. Diamonds pythons seem to be that way too, like this snake never leaves this perch.
My Darwin's draping over hers right now.
Oh, nice. Field trip.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that is awesome. Is that the reduced pattern right there?
Yeah.
Badass.
Nice.
Yeah, see, I think there's a lot of subtleties that people are starting to pay more attention to these days now, and we're starting to see those differences more. Like I definitely, my Darwins don't handle the same as my other snakes.
No.
They handle very differently. They remind me much more of green trees in the way like they react to my hands and support, and how like they just get cruising because I'm not holding them the way they want. It's just different.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too. I mean, just like we're saying, the variation amongst individuals. Like my two blackheads are polar opposites of each other when it comes to handling. The one that's with yours right now, Riley, he grips on, he holds on almost in like a prehensile way. He'll wrap the tail. The girl won't grab onto me at all. She's like just trying to fall. Like she would drop, 6 feet if I let her to get away. So, they very much have unique personalities.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a question there about if your Papuans are soaking all the time. Is it all of yours? I would say 95% of mine do.
Oh, let's see. Those, no, none of them. No, I think it's only just a couple of mine do. I wouldn't say all of them. I don't even know if half of them do. I think it's just those younger ones, and I don't know if that's because the older ones I have are in better insulated enclosures where there's less humidity or less ventilation, so they don't feel the need to. But it's just it seems random for my animals. It just seems very random and probably personality based at that.
And the other part that I think people don't take into consideration is the difference between where we're at, right?
Yeah.
You're on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. So is something here on the East Coast affecting that so that like 95% of mine are in the water bowl, whereas like you're saying it's hit or miss with yours. So what's the difference? You know, I don't know if it's something to do with the cold winter, which is the dry heat, which, you know, maybe they're trying to get more humidity or whatever, but I don't know.
Yeah. I've had a lot of cloud cover here lately. We've been getting some rain. And so there's been a lot more condensation on my snake room windows throughout the day. Like there definitely is at night, but it's staying longer. So I don't think it's burning off as much. So I think right now we've got a little spike in humidity, which is rare for out here because we get this like kind of dry winter air. But in the summer, you know, it'll probably be a different story.
Right.
I've got an arboreal false water cobra right now. Can you guys?
Oh,
see
yeah,
I can see that. That's
got
awesome.
himself all.
What's
all
the
wrapped up.
temperament with them like? What are they?
So
pretty
far,
chill?
so
Are
good
they-
for both of my two. They're both very very chilled out. Neither have tried to take any shots. But yeah, just super inquisitive, very very visual.
Yeah.
I can be on the other side of the room and I'm being watched very
Mhm.
obviously.
Mhm.
But this is actually the most active that this dude has been since I put him in the new enclosure. He burrows, he gets under the cypress mulch and periscopes his head out.
Nice.
I love the periscoping.
Yeah.
They do that a lot. But yeah, you know, the girl that I still have in quarantine hoods up a lot more than the boy here behind me. But
How are they when it comes to feeding time?
oh, ferocious. like pogo stick, just
Yeah.
they explode out of the hide, they flail all over the place, and I've never seen a snake eat something so quickly. That's what it's like, a greased hot dog going down the throat. Like
Wow.
Yep.
they just
That's
like
crazy.
They
when you
inhale.
hear rear fang, don't let them chew on you. Like no, you don't have a chance. Like the second this thing bites down on the
It's
on
off.
the mouse, it's probably chewed like 5 times in a second. And
Yeah.
it's halfway down the throat. You know,
Wow.
they're
The
so fast.
the
Yeah,
big male at Santa Barbara that I used to care for, I'd have to have food on forceps ready to go when
Yeah.
I opened his door, and I'd have to stand back and open it with a hook just to give myself a buffer of room because he'd come flying out the door, and I'd put the rat in front of him and I'd hold it just so, and he'd go past the rat and then come back just so he could eat it butt first every time.
Wow.
Just a
now
sick-
did you get any constriction? Because I don't. They just go straight
No,
for the
he
swallow.
just grabs it and flails. He'll
Yeah.
fall to the ground. You can pick him up and put him back in, whatever. Yeah, he just starts wolfing it down. It's the same with my Crebos. They just start eating right away. Unless they get a weird grip, then they'll just crush it into the ground or against the wall or something until they can adjust to the side and then just eat it all, like just absolute wood chippers.
Awesome.
Wow.
And to address the question from Summer there, I think in the wild they're pretty generalist feeders. Amphibians, fish, birds, snakes, small mammals. I think they're garbage disposals.
You could hand them a frozen thawed like herring and they'll eat it.
Yeah. Zach Loafman feeds his trout.
Yeah.
His whole rainbow trout.
Just
Really?
right down the gullet. Yep. And it'll come out the next day. It's that fast.
Yeah, that's what he was
Wow.
saying. It comes out as more of a schmear when you do fish, but there you go.
Yep. Same with Crebos.
Yeah.
Good for you guys, man. I'll stick with my, big shit pythons, I guess.
Now, weren't you thinking about some North American colubrids as well?
Yeah, I mean,
You
yeah.
want
So
decays.
what's that?
You want decays.
Oh,
Yeah.
and geckos.
Decays.
Snakes. I would love to have a naturalistic setup of decay snakes. I think they are super cool. I don't know.
Not tokays.
No.
Those things suck. They're my finger.
I've had them. Yeah, right.
That was from bastard. Good thing he bought the damn gecko. If he would said, "Nah, I changed my mind," I'd have made him buy it. Anyway, decay snakes.
I've been toying with that idea, but again, it's like one of those things where it's like, stay focused. Not too many. So I think to get my colubrid fix out in the for North America is about field herping for me, right?
Totally.
So go see them in the wild.
Nice.
I get more enjoyment out of that.
That's
And,
where I'm at with that kind of stuff for sure.
Yeah.
I tried going back to keeping king snakes again because like my first snake was a California king snake. So a few years ago I had some And I think 6 months in, I was just like, man, it's just not the same anymore. And I sold them to a friend. And yeah, like I've got my corn snakes that I love, but they're just different. And I think yeah, if I were to deal with North American stuff, it would just be living vicariously through others' collections, enjoying that, or herping.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think I've said this multiple times, but I don't think that I would be as happy herping in North America as I was in Australia, but I had a good time, man. It was really cool. There's some really cool species out there.
Yeah.
And really cool environments and stuff and things that we have here that nobody else has in the world. And
yeah,
I don't know.
Totally.
It's good to appreciate that stuff,
We're just lacking in cool arboreal things here. I feel like the North American snakes never decided to climb trees.
I don't know. If you see a rattlesnake in a tree or rat snakes in trees, I mean, I was actually watching.
They'll do it, but it's not like a green tree python or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Nothing that resides.
Yeah. I was watching the NKF herping's recent video, and it's at like freezing cold, 50 degrees or something. He's finding like cottonmouths and rat snakes out in trees and stuff like that.
It's crazy.
And it's just really cool to see that. I mean, one cottonmouth he had seen a bunch of times, and it had an infected eye, and this time he sees it and the eye's like just gone and the infection's healing. And then another rat snake's just like hiding in some bushes or under some leaves, and it looks like it's just weathering the winter. It just looks skinny and cold and beat up, but it's just cruising around doing its thing, like checking them out. And it's just, when you see that, it's kind of hard to not appreciate like just at least our diversity here. We spend so much time admiring what's in Australia and Indonesia that it ends up becoming exotic in its own right because it's so different than what we spend all our time focusing on. And I think that's recently why
I up for Womas and whiskey.
Womas and whiskey.
I'm so there.
Oh shit, that's gonna end bad.
Yeah, only tune in seriously for the first 30 minutes. The last hour is a shit show.
Yeah,
that'll be a good one.
I think Animals at Home, he said, do you guys think we will start to see or restart seeing more species and diversity in the reptile trade in the next few years?
Yes.
I think we will. And I think that people that do podcasts or YouTube or any kind of platform is sort of what we kind of did with Morelia, right? Before we did the podcast, Morelia was sort of like this underground group of people that, like, you know what I mean? They're like, I don't know. It's like, those guys, we don't
crab people.
Crappets.
But the more and more you promote the correct information, and it still frustrates me when I see people that I just saw some video the other day and I'm watching it and they're putting out the wrong information, and I'm just like, oh my God, it just frustrates me. Yeah. But it's, it's happens. And I think that again, back to just promoting species that maybe people don't know about, that maybe are cool and why they're cool. And I think that, people just don't know about that stuff.
Right.
Like they just know like whatever's cool or fashionable at the moment,
The misinformation and the blind spots, just the utter lack of information, I feel like really is our biggest adversary in all this. In many ways, not just from fellow keepers, but also just the public at large. I think that education is so important.
I see so much of it at work these days. Like, it's 2020, and some of these animals that should be like no brainers as far as like how to keep, or at least a couple quick Google searches to like steer you in the right direction. People are still, dropping the ball big time. I don't mean to like rag on anything in particular, but I had a customer have to buy a replacement baby bearded dragon for his daughter's Christmas present because he didn't know to turn the light off at night.
Oh.
He fried the damn thing for a week and didn't pick up on the fact that this thing was hiding under a rock in the farthest corner, like cooking, not eating, and like his excuse was, well, the guy at the counter didn't tell me to turn the light off at night. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
argue.
that goes back to maybe one brain cell thinking about what happens to the sun. It goes
Unbelievable.
away. Like
Unbelievable.
just use the one.
Just idiotic negligence is like all I can say.
Happens every day.
Yeah.
Where have you been, buddy?
Oh,
Like,
that's terrible.
and it's
Yeah.
sad because guess what? That animal suffered, and then the other animal's now viewed as just a disposable. Like, hope I got this one right.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Swap
that's
the goldfish overnight kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the one thing that I hate about
Yep.
selling snakes, right?
Yep.
That's why I would so much rather give a snake to somebody that I know is going to take care of it and appreciate it for what it is. And, you know, than to have to sell to somebody that I know, like, somebody contacted me the other day and was like, they started, to ask me questions or whatever, which I don't have a problem with. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
sometimes I get a little frustrated because it's like, well, I have this website that I put all this work into and all the information.
Podcast.
You can tell when somebody
You just gotta
hasn't
click
done
on it.
any research. You can tell
9
when
years
somebody
of a
just wants an
podcast.
answer. Yeah.
Talking about the same thing to the point where we're sick and tired of talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then you just know the further and further you get that this is just not good. And, it's just, it's going to end badly. And I don't know. I hate that. I hate that.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I have had 2 people in the last week come and go, what are your cheapest turtles? None of them are cheap. There's no such thing. That might say $30 for the turtle, but guess what? The tank and all this other says $400. Like, there's no such thing as a cheap turtle.
And if that's what you're, if that's what your first question is, then maybe you should consider getting. Oh
man, I walk a fine line being in that industry, man. Because like
I know your struggle there.
And it's probably a good thing I wear a mask. When people ask me that question, because I'm like doing this, I'm like, kidding. I give them the look, and they only get this much of it, so they're not immediately offended by me. looking at them like they're. Never mind. But it's bad, and you know what? I would rather not sell an animal and lose out on a $500 sale for the shop, because what's ultimately going to happen is that animal is going to suffer.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time.
But it's a tough position to be in too, because it's hard to know. At least when I was working at a shop, I felt like it was hard to know who those obviously you can get the sense that somebody's probably going to torch the animal.
Oh,
right?
yeah. You right away in the first few questions they ask.
When something doesn't seem like it's going right. But then the other side of it is that you don't want to judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. Everybody has the right to learn to be a good keeper, and we all start somewhere.
Yeah, like
and
I've
who
said
are
before,
we to say?
There were just definitely times where I'd hand the snake over the counter and be like, "Good luck, little buddy." I don't know how this is going to go for you, but that's all you can do is just educate as much as you can and try to be a resource for those folks and hope that they actually care enough to learn.
Yeah.
That's the struggle for sure.
It's hard.
I miss that.
I think it's harder when you have to do it digitally and you're not able to talk to somebody face to face.
Right.
Like when you're just selling snakes on Morph Market or something, and your only conversation is like text messages or at best a phone call, and then the animal's just gone, and you just hope that what you passed on translated and was absorbed appropriately, and that at the very least they'll still reach out to you for questions if they have issues later on. But yeah, I mean, there's that fine line between trying to do what's right and then also not telling somebody what to do. I guess
it's tough.
It is.
It's tough for sure.
It is,
because some of those folks that are asking silly questions or might not really be on the right path off the get-go, might just need that little push in the right direction, and then maybe they're a fantastic keeper. I'm sure the questions I asked were absolutely ridiculous when I was trying to get my first carpet python.
And I think back then there was less information, so it was even harder to sort of. I think maybe that's the difference. Like my generation of keepers, you just figured it out, right? You sort of used your common sense from books and trying to sort of what blew my mind was, the whole idea of micro habitats, right? You have these habitats and, you look on your phone and you say, okay, in Queensland right now, it's, it's 106 degrees and at night it's going down to 70 degrees. But like, I don't know. Does that mean that carpet pythons need to be 106 degrees? No,
Right.
It does not.
Right.
They're trying to get away from that.
Yeah. So the guy who cooked that bearded dragon that I was just talking about, when I was on the phone with him and he was telling me what was going on. He's like, "Oh, I just figured, they're reptiles. It's Australia. They like it hot." And I was like, "Dude, no. It's a misconception. Just because an animal is from somewhere where it's hot, whether it be Texas, Africa, Australia, the top of a volcano in China, I don't know. It doesn't matter. They don't like
it doesn't quite have the option to leave.
Yeah, they don't like that it's, on the virtue of dehydrating them and killing them if they stand on the wrong side of the shade line. They have found ways to adapt to that environment and survive and avoid those extremes, or at least use them to their benefit in a safe way. You don't find Australian reptiles like kicking their feet up, cracking a beer when it's 150 degrees out in Alice Springs going, yes, this is what I've been waiting for all winter. No, they're hiding in a fucking rock or under a log somewhere going, God damn it, it's hot out.
Yeah, Riley, you live in Sacramento. Sometimes it's going to be 105 degrees. What did you do? You got air conditioning.
Yeah, it's 110. You don't see shit outside.
You make your microclimate too.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, when we went to Queensland, the first time we spent a lot of time in Cairns and in Tully and all that, all the Gelat and all those areas. And it's very, very tropical, right? Just like you would think, very humid, probably 90% humidity, in these gorges. When the sun came up, it was like 7 o'clock in the morning and, the rocks are like 120 degrees, and it's like the sun just came up. So you can absolutely see those species coming out in the morning, collecting the sun, and then they're out and you don't see them until the sun goes down. And like, you might see lizards and stuff like that, but even, just a couple of thoughts from the trip, but when we found that, I can't remember exactly what species it was, but it was this big monitor. And basically we had sort of caught it where it was sort of sunning itself on the road, but I think it got sort of stressed and it ran to this tree. But you could see we had to get away from it and let it be because it was overheating. You could see just by what it was doing and how it was acting. And you're like, well, wait a minute, this is a monitor and it's like 100 degrees here right now. I don't understand why it's overheating or whatever. And like when you go into, further towards the center of Australia, as we went to like Chillago and stuff, you would go to those caves and you're talking like a 30-degree difference in temperature inside those caves. Like, I guess maybe Lucas, the next video I'll give you will be that, because I'm walking inside these caves, temp gunning this stuff, and it's like 70 degrees. And I'm like, okay, I didn't even think about reptiles. I just said, I couldn't believe, how did people survive? How did human beings survive in this environment? Like, how did they live? Where's the water? It's so dry. It's so hot. It's, and at nighttime it's cold. Like, how did they adapt to this? And, you see the caves and you're like, oh, okay, this is what they did.
Yeah.
Aha.
That's another reason why I don't like having such one-sided limiting terms as it's either arboreal or semi-arboreal or it's terrestrial or it's subterranean, because let's face it, most snakes are probably all of the above, with the exception of like blood pythons and anacondas. But then again, we've all seen anacondas climbing up trees, half draped over rivers, or retics up in trees. And you know what? Like, if carpets are going down and escaping into rock crevices, does that make them subterranean? No, the label still says semi-arboreal, but that's just because we're used to seeing them when we encounter them, which is typically when the peak of the heat of the day is gone. They're out hunting and they're out active. And guess what? They're hanging from a tree looking for rodents by a game trail. But guess what they did the other 75% of the day? So, having just these limited labels, I think it limits our creativity in how we can really think of these animals and what they need and what they do.
Yeah. That's why I firmly believe that the best way to educate yourself about the species you keep is to try to get to the environment and see it for yourself and feel it and experience it, the heat, the cold, the weather, when is the sun coming up, when is the moon coming up, like all those things. It's like I mean, you can learn so much in that time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think there's no limit to that. I mean, that video that came out not too long ago talking about how ball pythons are borderline arboreal, I was like, well, I really can't disagree with any of that, especially considering I've seen ball pythons several feet up in the air in trees of their own volition, you know. It's just,
yeah, I heard somebody talking about that too, where they were sort of pushing back on that a little bit, and they were saying that, like, you know, like, because they caught him in a tree, does that mean, it's sort of like to your point, what you were just saying, Riley, just because they caught him in a tree, does that make them the arboreal? Or like, if the snake is starving and it knows that it can go up and catch a bird or whatever it's going to catch in the tree, is it doing that because it's starving, or is it doing that because it likes to be in trees?
Yeah.
You know?
And
it's just labels, right? Like, I can climb a tree, but would you call me arboreal?
In that moment, it looks like it. I think that's the thing. We're
you only two are arboreal to me to begin with because you're so high up. You know?
My point isn't that I'm saying calling them arboreal is right or wrong. I guess my point is, who cares?
Yeah,
right? Like about the label. Like
the label is just a human construct. It's just for our organization's sake, because if we have a question, we need to have an answer for it. Instead of just saying, I don't know, or you can't just limit it in one way, we have to have some construct just to sort of simplify it and explain it in a reproducible manner to get people's foot in the door. And I think that's fine, but like, I don't know. I just, labels are just silly like that. And that ball python video, even the argument could have been argued as silly, because all he was showing was people's little snapshots or one little clip of their snake perched or cruising or doing something. You know, we don't know what the animal does quantifiably throughout its day. We just happen to see it in that moment. And that argument was that, you know, we always think of ball pythons as living in termite mounds because the areas where they're finding them, they've cleared out all the trees, and all that's left for them to hide in are termite mounds. But if you go into other areas, their data showed that like 76% of them were found up in trees. And that's just because that area had trees and the other areas where they're collected don't, for whatever reason. So, you know, it's perspective, it's a lens, it's all human construct. The bottom line is the animals don't give a damn what you call it. As long as they can eat, shed, stay safe, hydrate, and reproduce. Those are the goals. Those are the biological components they have going for them. And however they accomplish that is however they accomplish that.
Yeah. Right. Agreed.
Like brown tree snakes in Indo versus brown tree snakes or night tigers in Australia, they're the same thing, but you know, they've adapted differently because they're separated now, and they accomplish their biological programmed goals in life in different ways in different climates, yet they're the same thing. So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those it's, I don't know, man. It's it's crazy.
Yeah,
because we get so caught up in these things, and you know, we die on our hill, and you know,
it's all so complex and nuanced, but also so simple all at the same time.
It is. I think the simplest answer is to say, just, you know, do what's best for your animals and don't limit yourself.
Yeah.
If you just, that's your goal. If your goal is just doing right by your animals and just trying to make it work, however you get there is up to you.
You know, like the thing I love about, you know, like events like Carpet Fest more than anything is like the whole idea that like now I can actually talk to you, and I don't care how long you've been keeping or anything like that. But like, if you have an idea or an observation that's going to teach me something, I'm all in. You know what I mean? Like, and we can have a conversation about, well, here's my experiences, here's your experiences, you know, like, oh, wow, that's pretty fascinating. And, you know, to me, that's like the priceless thing, you know, and like that's sort of like how you learn all your, at least that's how I learn, you know, it's just from talking to people. And like the more and more you talk to people and sort of open your mind and not be so closed-minded that your way is the best way. And like just because you produced, you know, 150 clutches last year, that somehow you're the Zen master of whatever species it is. And, you know, if you only keep one in a tank, somehow you are not. And like, I don't know, man, like you might be able to learn. I remember in the early days of ball pythons, like they used to say that like people with smaller collections were able to learn more about their snakes and probably more successful breeding wise, like from a percentage wise. They might not have, say, the volume of numbers, but like they'll get, if they tried 10 clutches, they'll probably able to get all 10 to go. Whereas if you're like, you know, spread yourself so thin with all these animals, you're not going to be able to develop the time or know those animals individually. Like, you know, that person that has 10 would,
Right.
you know? So,
Yeah.
I mean, they've always sort of been saying it, but this underlying thing about like, you know, you got to breed to be somebody, you got to breed to be somebody was always sort of like, you know, that background voice going, if you don't breed or create the coolest snake or the newest morph or whatever, you know.
It's as if people forgot there's still more to discover out there. Just herping, you can make a name for yourself, finding cool discoveries. We're just
that's true.
Pioneering
so many things too, not just herpetoculture.
Yeah, it really is. There's there's so much more out there, and I love the fact that in my little sector of the industry now where I'm at, I see the joy of the innocence of people who just keep for the sake of keeping, whether it's kids or a dude who works construction. He just likes his hognose at home. That's it. Like that's the coolest. It's so refreshing because they come in and they don't see things the same way I do. They don't think of things the same way I do. They're thinking about the substrates or the fake plants or, you know, the part of the house or all these things for that one animal. And they're so tuned into that one animal that like the slightest little thing they pick up on and they just love it. And I think that's the most refreshing thing because sometimes we don't do that.
Can I, go ahead, Eric, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Can I take it to my environmental studies depressing place like I tend to do?
Do it.
Yeah, man.
Real quick. I think that as we watch shit hit the fan, that there's going to be more of a pull, and maybe there already is, for people to have that piece of nature in a box in their house. I think that as things slowly disappear here, if you will, that more and more people are going to find the appeal in that. And for the sake of herpetoculture, that might be a positive development. Just an observation. I don't know, just a thought.
I agree.
Yeah, I find that the older I get, the more I try to, or I have a desire to want to be in touch with nature. And I think that, you know, today's society, we're so like pulled away from that, right? And like I've been reading these books about Native American folklore and culture, and you know how they use the environment and we're able to understand what certain things meant just by they didn't have the sophisticated equipment or stuff but they were so in tune with the environment. It's sort of similar to what I'm saying about the person that just has the one snake, is like because they're really dialed into that one animal, or say 5 animals as opposed to 150 animals, that they're able to really pick up on these subtle cues that that sort of gets lost on us in today's shuffle of today's world, and I think that for me, I don't know, like I love technology. I love the fact that we're having this conversation right now because of technology and all that. But like, when you're out in the wild, for me, there's something like there's no cell service. There's something quiet about it. There's something peaceful. There's something like in my inner soul that says, this is the way you're supposed to be, if you will,
There's definitely a battery there that you can charge that I think a lot of people haven't figured out how to connect with. With all the noise of what our lives have become.
100%.
Yeah.
The natural natural world is so important to us, even if we don't realize, just on a subconscious level. I think just we get so caught up in our own human constructions of whatever it is in the world that we forget to like just stop and breathe.
Yeah. My wife like doesn't understand, like when Rob came up and we went to the Pine Barrens in Delaware, like every day we're going on a trip somewhere. We're all across Pennsylvania. We're going to New York, timber rattlesnake dens, all this stuff. And it's go, 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 go. And she's like, you're on vacation. Would you relax? And I'm like, but you don't understand. This is relaxing to me. Like I know you don't get it. But like when I'm there and we were climbing up the mountain in New York to this rattlesnake den, I'm nearly dying as I'm climbing up this hill. But like when you get to the top, you're like, you just sit there and you take it in for a second, and you're just like, oh, wow. It's just, I don't know, man. It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat.
I think it's something that everybody should do at least once a year. I know it's hard to do with COVID and work and family and all these things, but just if you made it a point to at least go camping for a weekend or something like that once a year, turn the cell phone off, go out somewhere where there is no cell service. Like we went to Yosemite a couple years ago with a housemate of mine whose brother lives up there. This was when I was still in Santa Barbara. And there was plenty of cell signal up there, but I just turned my phone on airplane mode. And I was like, sorry, I'm tuning out for the next 3 days. And I didn't charge it. I didn't carry it with me. I didn't have it in my pocket. I left it in my car, off in the glove box. We went driving around. We went hiking, like climbed up onto some rocks where like if you step too far, you're falling 1,000 feet to your death sort of thing. And just like sitting there, soaking up trees, waking up to a waterfall and a running river and having a bobcat run right through camp while I'm making coffee and all this stuff. And it was like, I remember how good I felt for the following like couple weeks afterwards. Just like nothing bothered me. I had no stress. I was good for quite some time. It just felt really refreshing. And then the real world came crushing back in.
Yeah, it reframes everything, right? All of our little daily struggles become pretty trivial to an extent.
My stress has been it's like I'm managing it long enough to get to the next trip. I have to space them out enough so where it's like, and you come back and it like totally changes your perspective on life and everything. I look at like when people are coming and complaining because, I don't know, their turkey was too dry at Thanksgiving. Somehow that's the turkey's fault. It's not the fact that you overcooked it. It's like, I don't make them out back. It's not like we have, I never understand that. People come in and they're complaining about the apple. They're like, this apple is bad. And like, well, it's not like I made it. I mean,
grew on a freaking tree, fell down, some dudes picked it up, came on a truck. Sorry.
Even our idea, see, even that, like it comes into my day-to-day work, right? It's like I go around, if you go through the produce department and I'm looking at stuff, if the apples aren't perfect, it's like, oh, they're trash, get rid of them. And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with that
Consumer
other apple.
Standards for produce is absurd.
It's crazy. And you watch people will walk by and actually pick up something and you're like, oh, that's they couldn't be fresher, and they're just like, oh, I don't like the way it looks, and throw it down. So like, I don't know, man. It's so weird.
How dare you judge your fruit from Chile that's only here because of air transport?
Right.
You shouldn't have stone fruit in summer or winter.
Right. Shame on you.
Yeah,
but it's grateful. I don't know. It's crazy. And like, just like, I don't know, man. It's weird things that, so like when people are yelling at me about that kind of shit, I'm like, really, man? Like this is what upsets you so much in life that like you're just going to bitch and complain about the fact that your fruit has another knob off the side of it or something. I don't know. Your lemon isn't perfectly yellow, or the knob on the top is a little twisted, or like your carrot has another offshoot or something. It's like, come on, man.
One grape in this bag of grapes was smushed.
Yes. How dare you?
What are you trying to pull?
Or all the carrots is upon us.
Oh man. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I agree.
I don't know how we got on the topic of fruit.
I don't know either. but I like it.
We admire the natural things in this world, including
When I
fruit.
worked at the fish market, it was inside of a produce market, and people would come to me with their fruit complaints. I'm like, I'd cut the fish. Like, what do you want?
Well, I was impressed by that. You were actually a fish cutter, huh? That's how I started too.
Oh, no
Yeah.
way, really?
Uh-huh. What a shitty job, man. I used to have to hunt fish for 8 hours. Oh man.
I did it for 4 years, and the worst was actually always Christmas because we had the Dungeness crab over here, right? So I would crack crab for 14 hours straight, and my hands would be bleeding. And I was allergic to the iodine too, so like bleeding from chemical burns.
Yeah, I would get this rash up my arm from reaching in to grab lobsters at a lobster tank.
Yeah, no, it
or
messes
whatever.
you up.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I never
Another thing we have in common.
There you go.
I didn't have as many bad grocery store experiences as you, although that was my first job. I was just a 16-year-old kid. They threw a sweater and some gloves at and said, go spend the next 8 hours in the back of the milk box every weekend.
Oh, that sucks too, man.
I liked when they threw me in the walk-in because then I didn't have to talk to people.
See, that's the thing. Like I finally figured out a system, but I've got like milk cartons to the ceiling, so I'm like climbing over shit like a monkey all day in this freezer, wearing a beanie, a sweater, and gloves, trying not to freeze to death, and then stocking things. And then people would come in and think it's hilarious and like reach through and grab my hand on the shelf and go, ah, and then just like look at me like they expect some reaction. I'm like, I'm cold and scared the shit out of me. Stop it.
Yeah.
I'm just a kid. I want to get out of here.
I'll tell you what, man, the best cure for a hangover is to go hang in a freezer box, man. That cures the hangover like boop.
Hangover is touching slimy fish in the cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad day when you have to come in after a long night of drinking and have to cut fish for 8 hours. That's a tough pill to swallow.
Ice at 6 a.m. Just wanting to
Oh, look at that.
Snakes. I'll just hold one.
Yeah.
There you go. And that's a nice snake. Is that the one that just shed?
Yes. Yep. She shed out.
How old is she?
Probably coming up on a year.
Oh, damn.
Okay.
Yeah.
They grow fast.
They do grow fast.
Now,
I even fed her a rat. You know, this is mice and quail growth.
Wow.
So do you have a rhyme or reason on how you mix it up, or do you just go whatever you grab is what you feed them?
For the adult male, which is with Riley at the shop in Sacramento, he gets like a small or medium quail or 2 little mice because I just wanted to maintain him, right? Like he was about the size I want him to be when I acquired him.
Right.
But for her, I'm kind of figuring it out more as I go because, you know, the female I'll want to be a bit bigger. So no real rhyme or reason to it yet. I think I'll just keep slow growing her up to size, and then I'll probably do more of the same thing where it's mostly quail. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to consider my relationship with blackheads and rats because it was very easy for me to say with the male that I just wasn't gonna do it because he was already big. Yeah. But I don't know if I want to completely grow this girl up on mice and quail. Maybe I do want to toss a rat every now and then. I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
You know, Rob swears by the fact that we overlook mice as a staple and like automatically go to rats. And, you know, like I think he feeds the majority of his collection mice because he breeds his own mice. And like, I got to tell you, man, when I got that Darwin and Tully from him, I'm like, this thing only ate mice. Like, wow. Like, you know, like solid, you know?
Yeah. And the fat content in a mouse, is it true from what you guys have heard that it's a little bit less of a butterball than a rat, a little leaner?
I think so. Yeah.
That's the logic that I've been going off of anyway, but I don't know if that's an urban legend.
So I'm always curious with with the Aspidites, well, both of you guys have them, but like with the blackheads in particular, do you feed them more like a colubrid, or are you doing it more seasonal, or like what's the approach?
So up until this year, I did small meals more often.
Okay. What is the more often? Every week?
every week or
Every
two.
10 days? Okay.
Yeah, it depends. If I did a quail, I'd usually wait 2 weeks because the quails were a little bigger. If I did like
Uh-huh.
the little mice, I would maybe do a weekly. But I'm trying to do more of a cycle feed with them now too, just since
Uh-huh.
that's what I'm doing with everything. So at the moment, it's fairly sparse because I'm also giving them a little bit of a drop. So uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we cycle the ones at the shop. Um, feed heavy certain times of the year, feed sparingly other times of the year. But when we do feed, it's like big meals for them.
Mm.
I think, I don't know what you guys think, but I guess maybe this, I don't know, we're almost at 2 hours if you want to cut it off soon, but maybe this could be our last topic of choice, if you will. But, everybody focuses on naturalistic enclosures and UV and the special heat and how you're going to take care of it. But what I don't hear people talk enough about is diet and how fat we keep our reptiles, man. And to me, that's probably the most detrimental thing to them and their health long term in the hobby. And everybody seems to think like, oh, well, they feed it once a week, no big deal, like
Yeah,
it's
killer.
Yeah, man, it really is.
I think we'll all be looking back in 10, 20 years, and we'll have had that much time to pass with the animals that we have currently, and I think we'll see a difference. I think very few ball python breeders have animals in double digits of age. I think very few people get their big fat butterball breeders over 10, 15, and I think they all should be getting beyond 20 years. I've seen plenty of ball pythons get it over 40, and still, doing really well. And I think, in 10, 15 years time, we'll be able to look back because I think we're starting to see a shift in that thought process now.
Right.
And I think, for instance, like the way we don't feed our babies at all this time of year.
Right.
And so they grow slower. So it takes them a little bit longer to reach maturity in that adulthood. I think when you spread things out, you'll see a lot of that. And I don't know. I think about diamond python syndrome and how that affected the thought process and industry and everything around diamonds. And now that we've got that figured out, you're spreading out the food, you're letting them cool down. I always equate like the body systems of reptiles and the digestion to that of a car. Like if you're constantly feeding it and running it, constantly feeding it and running it, you burn the edge out. You burn that stuff out way faster than if you gave it a break and let it rest and took care of it and did a few other things. So that's where, paying attention to what you're feeding it and what your food is eating, like, lab grade rats lab grade rats are just eating Missouri or whatever big fat chow that gets them up to size, faster. Yeah. But, I bet if you looked at the muscle content of a wild animal that's eating, wild rodents and squirrels and birds that are eating natural foods versus, lab grown diets for a species that's exactly the same, you'd see an absolute difference.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
And
couldn't agree more.
Somebody posted something earlier. I wish I remembered it. He had some species of snake, some Aussie elapid or something like that.
Yes, Matt Somerville. Yes, he fed it like one mouse a year or something, and it was fat.
He fed it 6 times, 6 hopper mice in an entire year, and it finally passed away out of nowhere. And he dissected it, and the thing was obese from 6 hopper mice.
Damn.
Yes,
this is an active species.
Yeah. So my question to that would be is like, okay, is that and then the exercise? Is it the diet? Is it a mix of both? I mean, it's hard to, on one side of it, you have the whole idea that, pythons, and I'm just talking about pythons in particular, are ambush predators, right? Mm-hmm. So they're sitting and waiting. Yes, they do move, they do travel, they do things like that. But for the most part, they're waiting for that meal to come along. So it's not like they're, it's not like an indigo snake where it's actively foraging, if you will, right?
The metabolism is probably a lot different between those two.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So does that matter? Does that make a difference that, that snake is sitting there waiting and you're feeding it, X amount of, meals a year and it becomes obese, or is it just the fact that it's the prey item itself? I remember, I don't know whatever happened to this, but there was a hognose breeder that was on Reptile Radio back in the day, and he had this interesting idea that, like, for the most part, the mice that he was getting were all males. So were they loaded with testosterone, which then affected the animal, and it's by taking in that extra testosterone, or did it somehow make for fatter snakes? Because he noticed that the growth rate on those animals were just like, and
See,
he's
there's
like,
something else that I would have never thought of. That is so true. They're all
Right?
boys.
Right. So is that
What the hell?
right? Is that affecting them?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That's just all interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
things to
I'm
think
sure.
about.
I'm sure there's variation within every species, but you know what? The whole time while you guys were sort of brainstorming that stuff, I'm thinking, okay, the biggest species of snake we know of are either equatorial or subtropical, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking African rocks, berms, retics, some of the kinghorn eye, anacondas. So like, there's probably a mid band around the globe where we find those. And those animals don't necessarily experience a winter. They might experience seasonal rainfall. So they probably, the bigger animals have to eat more to sustain their body mass. So, maybe there's some correlation to, like, okay, certain species are probably built to eat year round because food is available year round. And then certain species, not so much. And then there's probably exceptions to those rules within areas. I always think about, some interviews I've listened to over the years of Vin Russo talking about some of those island boas that only have, 8 to 12 weeks a year where migratory birds are even passing through their range, and that's all they get to eat, and that's it. As well as how, there's like 6 weeks or whatever it is, or 10 weeks with his ball pythons out of the year, where he feeds them as much as they will eat, and then the rest of the year is fasting and breeding. And I always think about some of that, and we, as much as we try not to anthropomorphize our animals, the fact that we think these animals might all need a regular scheduled year-round amount of feeding might be incorrect just in its foundations. And so that's where the seasonality, I think, agrees a little bit more with my thoughts on it, feeding at different times of year and not other times of the year. And then it plays into why some animals might be obese, and, why maybe Eric's approach to feeding them leaner and keeping them smaller and what that, everything you're doing is maybe more natural and lends to, closer to wild type diet and then therefore body mass and build.
Yeah. And I feel like you have to think of it species specific too, right? Because like something that exists where there is a serious winter, they're not going to be eaten very much during that winter, right? Whereas like maybe like an Aru green tree or something like that, the conditions are fairly the same throughout the year, right? So maybe it's more of a smart thing to feed them like once a month or so throughout the year rather than like a cycle feed because their conditions are fairly stable. But I don't know.
I wonder too if like, if you want to take the whole cycle feeding and another step, and I know that you're not going to be able to recreate nature in a box, but like the ideas that we're trying to come up with as far as keepers is trying to replicate that as best we can for the overall health and the longevity of the species that we keep. Maybe cycle feeding yearly, like meaning that not every year is there going to be a bountiful prey abundance, So like, is that why you'll see in captivity where we're breeding a snake back to back 3 years in a row? Whereas if that snake was in the wild, it's probably breeding once in those 3 years. You know what I mean? And because of the availability of prey species, or, it may say, no, I'm not going to breed this year because, again, it all sort of goes back to like that idea that we have to breed all the time. And like, you can't take a year off. And if somehow I'm not breeding, I'm not legitimate that year. I wish that people would not necessarily make that the end all be all of who you are in the hobby, if you will,
Yeah. It makes me think of all the times I've heard of other people in zoos talking about how their anacondas took like an entire year off feeding. I've heard of that several times. The anaconda's just not eating for a whole calendar year, then the next year they're good.
And you even see it with like, so I had this lady that worked with my wife, and she had bought a ball python, and she bought it from a pet shop, and it wasn't eating. And I tried to explain to her that, like, probably out of all the python species, ball pythons are the best at just saying, no, I've had enough and I'm not going to eat anymore. Right.
Yeah.
But somehow we have this idea that if it's not eating, it's not healthy. And like, like really trying to, I guess there really has to be some serious studies on eating. Maybe there are out there and I just don't know where they are, but like eating. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like eating in the wild as opposed to experiments in captivity. Oh, there you go, Lucas. You got another project for you.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. We had a ball python at the Sacramento Zoo who's still there. I'm not there, but he is. And 40 years old. And previous keeper was feeding it only mice, feeding it several a week. And it got big, and it's a male, and it's the size of, a big female, a little over 2,000 grams. But it would notoriously go off feed for months at a time. And, us in the hobby, we hear about that all the time. It's just like, yeah, that's ball python, no big deal. But the veterinary staff, from a textbook standpoint, it just didn't make them comfortable. And so, they wanted to force feed it and do tests and do all these things. And I sort of had to find a middle ground where I was like, well, let's just back off how much we're offering and when. So I took it down from 4 mice a week to 1 mouse a month,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually it started eating again. But during this entire year where it was very irregular, it maybe lost 200 grams of weight. And then eventually it got back on track and was eating every 2-3 weeks. And it's just one of those things where I don't think everybody thinks of it, maybe appropriately for the species, but these things have insanely slow digestive systems. Their body has to go through so much physiological change just to put food in their stomach.
Yeah,
and
the
that
blood chemistry completely changes.
Unbelievable. Organs physically shrink and regrow during that time.
Yeah.
That's a serious ordeal for an animal.
Yep.
So, that's why I'm a big proponent of feeding only one food item at a time, for the most part, unless we're talking about colubrids or things that just wolf down little food items.
Different beast there, for sure.
Yeah, different thing. But yeah, it's just, snakes are probably the most overfed group of pet reptiles that we have in the hobby.
I love it when I tell people that aren't super in this world that I probably won't feed the big ones, because they don't know what breadlie is, right? So I just say the big one from October to March. They're like, huh? I might only eat 4 times a year. And they're like, why?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that reaction all the time at the shop. They're like, oh, he's eating a pup a week now. He's getting really big. I'm like, wow, you spoil your snakes. They're like, how so? It's like, oh, mine aren't eating until February. She's like, what? Like,
yeah. It's just so foreign to ourselves.
Yeah.
Also, I have to fact check myself. That blackhead's closer to 2 years old.
Okay.
My brain took a while on that one, but yeah.
No,
they shouldn't be that big at 1 year old.
Stop what you're doing. Put the rats down.
Yeah. Since we're on this subject, I really had to correct myself. Otherwise, I look like a massive hypocrite.
Because power feeder.
Yeah, I don't know. I think about those statements like, I hate to always pick on the ball python people, but they're just the ones that are they're the most out there, right?
Yeah,
so they talk about the 1,000-gram wall that they have to get over, and it's like, well, I love cheesesteaks, man, but there's gonna come a point where I'm not gonna eat anymore because I just can't. I'm just like, okay, I've had enough cheesesteaks.
The 300-pound wall of human.
No. I can't eat anymore, Yes, they're delicious, and I would love to, but I don't know.
I think certain species are built for bust and boom, and I think certain times of the year it probably is normal for some species to try and grab a meal as often as possible. Those species that live on islands where migratory birds only come for 8 to 12 weeks of the year. Who's to stop them? No, sir, you've had one. That's enough for the week. Share with the rest of the guys on the island. Your 20 brothers and sisters over there need stuff too. That doesn't happen. So I think maybe at certain, obviously it comes down to species and we just don't know, but imagine a perfect world where you could transplant yourself on one of those islands with all the amenities and some little invisible bubble and just observe a group of snakes on this island and watch. Imagine how different keeping would be if it just became known that, okay, species X only eats when it's raining at night, these months of the year, and then 4 months of the year it stops, and then shoot, who knows, maybe 3 months later it only eats a certain prey item different times of the year. I mean, Dave Kaufman went to New Caledonia and found out that, crested geckos and leachianus geckos and things certain times of the year shift food preferences. Like there's crickets and bugs and things available half the year, and then there's overripened down nectars and fruits everywhere the other half of the year. So we haven't even gotten into like prey availability and variation seasonally.
And look, nature's hard. Sometimes the prey wins. If the predator always wins, there would be no more prey, so this snake might be trying to eat all year, but it might only succeed a handful of times. And
that goes back to Eric's point, earlier, that not all of these animals are going to breed every year. Some years are not good years, bust and boom with rain and feast and famine, that
I think
affects everything.
I think it was in the Justin Julander Green Tree book that they said, even though they are perched in that S-coil position every day and ready to eat, or whatever, they might only catch like 7 meals a year or something like that.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're not trying. It's just that's the reality of existing in nature. It's not a buffet all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. Yeah. Everybody's idea of that is very skewed, if you will.
Well, it comes from a good place. We want to spoil our animals. We want to make sure they're well cared for. We want to make sure they're surviving and eating. And to the human construct, denying them food seems cruel because we're people, and that's just how our brains work.
Yeah. I don't know if a snake is getting like the satisfaction of eating a mouse like I would from eating a cheesesteak, but I don't know if like all the all the things are firing in the brain and everything, or maybe they are. Maybe they're like, oh my God, this mouse is delicious. I can't believe it.
That'd be interesting. Like we can obviously say that there are certain prey preferences for species, but maybe there's like other motivations as to why they like certain things at certain times of the year.
And that's the last thing I'll end on is like that whole idea that like, we are trying to make everything eat this mouse. Like, come on, man. Like, if you want to keep a species that doesn't eat mice, then get the prey. Like, I don't know.
Stock up on frog legs. They're available.
If you need hognose, get some tadpoles.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I learned that from Rob. He's just like, he's like getting a nulls and feeding these, I mean, he's challenged with those boas that he's got that in the wild are, they'll only eat them if they're sleeping on a piece of grass or whatever. And like, they sneak up and eat them. And if they're not perfectly still, they won't, but they have to be alive, but they can't be moving. And it's just
if you keep pounding the square peg into the round hole, eventually you'll break through, but you broke the hole.
If you don't get the snake to eat, it's going to be dead. So if you have a choice to make, it's like, okay, maybe, it gets worms or whatever, blah, 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 whatever the case would be that everybody's so afraid of. And that's another reason why I want to get a couple lizards and geckos, as you move into like keeping Antaresia, and if you ever want to breed them and stuff like that. I don't know. Or even geckos.
Get geckos that reach your tail and pull the tail off.
You? Throw a little bobtail into the thing. You're like, what are you doing?
Hey, it happens, man. Like, it is what it is. That's exactly why I think species like dragon snakes will never, ever be established in the hobby. I don't care who you are. Until somebody finds a super easy, sustainable, cheap, affordable, inconvenient, not messy, work-intensive way to get tadpoles growing like crazy, dragon snakes, leave them out in the wild. Don't try and bring them in and keep trying your methods to breed them, because even if you do figure out how to breed them, the market will never, ever support dragon snakes, because you also have to have an entire industry of cultivating tadpoles for that species. We don't even have people interested in captive breeding savanna monitors, and it can be done with your eyes closed. and they don't need any special food preferences or anything. So, I mean, kudos to people trying to figure out those species, but figure them out and then just leave them in nature. Some of them just don't do well in human care.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's some species that are no good, and and then there's other species that are way better. You see, there's a couple YouTube channels that kind of do that, where they're like, okay, well, let's look at this species. What are the pros and the cons, and sort of like, oh yeah, look.
I actually just watched that last night. The dragon snake.
He gave it all. So hard.
It was great. He was honest. He said, if you buy this snake, also buy a jar and alcohol so you can preserve it when it dies.
It was the best. It was awesome.
A good video.
Like hearing Owen come out of Clint.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Owen, he's not afraid to, I know we busted stones about the boas and stuff and everything, but like, he's not afraid to like, look at what he did with the fish. He's just like, oh, all right, I'm going to try fish. If he would have did that on like the MP days and he would be feeding a carpet python fish, they would be like, how dare you? You leave. We're taking away your Morelia card and you must go.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
oh man, the world we live in. Reptiles.
Yeah.
Man, my
Good
hair
stuff.
is really gray in this sunlight, man.
Oh, it looks glorious, man.
Like,
Looks
holy
good.
shit.
Hey,
What do they call it? Silver fox?
Silver fox. Woo.
got it. At least you got it. Enjoy it.
Yeah, that's true. I
keep wearing hats, but it's in there.
It's in there, yeah. Mine went downward. Mine's losing the fight towards gravity.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Well, it's
good.
we're on the discussion of food and feeding our animals and things. I'm gonna go feed this animal.
Indeed.
This animal hungry.
Me as well. Our metabolism is very different from the pythons, and I require a sandwich.
It's dinner time here for me, so
Nice.
Sure.
Well, I'm gonna go have some snacks.
Good stuff. This was a lot of fun, guys.
yeah, man.
Yeah. Always a good time.
Till next time.
All right,
next
gentlemen.
time.
See you later. Everybody's in the chat. Thanks for joining in. We'll catch you all next week. Hopefully, again, we just do this off the cusp, so don't count on anything because we're not promising it. So, bye.
Bye.
Yeah.